welcome everybody to the webinar regarding what's new in Analyser 4.0. So I've got a lot to cover in this webinar, so I'm going to try and keep it moving for you at a reasonable pace. So let's dive in. So it's worth having a quick look at the agenda. So we've got some people who are not familiar with ProcessVue, who are new to the software. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to give a brief overview of the ProcessVue software. We'll then have a look at some of the changes that we're seeing in the alarm management landscape. And then we'll dive straight into the new release of ProcessVue Analyser 4.0, and we'll have a look at the features and benefits that we're bringing as part of this release. So we'll be introducing a new licensing manager. We'll be introducing a new additional module for ProcessVue, which we are calling worklists. We're introducing a new connector type. We have included enhanced alarm enrichment with this release. We've introduced language support, and we've enhanced the user experience, and we've also included some new cyber security enhancements. So let's have a brief overview of ProcessVue for those that aren't familiar with it. So ProcessVue is a suite of products that is built around the life cycle of alarm management. There are three products within the suite. We have ProcessVue Sequence, which is the foundational application. It's an alarm historian, which allows us to collect alarms and events from multiple disparate systems and centralize that alarm and event information, normalize it before storing it in an industry standard SQL database, where we then present a unified and holistic view of the alarms and events. And we also have a basic frequency analysis module to get you started looking at things like nuisance alarms. Then we've got the ProcessVue Analyzer, which is our analytics package. It builds on the foundation of ProcessVue Sequence as its an alarm historian, but it adds real-time dashboards and a series of out-of-the-box reports for alarm and event insights and analytics. We've then got the ProcessVue Guardian, which is our master alarm database application. It provides a management of change workflow, which ensures any changes to alarm settings have to be approved before they can be deployed. It includes productivity toolset, which enables more efficient alarm rationalization and documentation activities with features such as copy one alarm to many and the ability to batch edit large numbers of alarms. It's also used to facilitate an alarm response manual for operators. So when those rare alarms come in that the operators forget how to deal with because they only see it once every 9-12 months, there's a digital reference that they can go to have a look and find out more information about that particular alarm that's come in, along with the recommended actions that they should be taking. So obviously this webinar is focusing on ProcessVue Analyzer and the new release 4.0. So Analyzer, as I said before, it's our analytics package. It effectively allows end users to benchmark their alarm systems to the alarm management standards and guidelines. For example, the ISO 18.2, the IEC 62682, and the EMEA 191 guidelines. So as the release of Analyzer 4.0 introduces a number of new features, those features can be found in a number of different components throughout the ProcessVue Analyzer software. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to provide you with an architecture overview of the ProcessVue Analyzer software, just so that we're familiar with all the different components. So on the right-hand side, we can see a list of alarm and event data generating entities such as SCADA systems, DCS systems, historians, building management systems, etc. To the left of that, we've got the ProcessVue collectors. It's their job to retrieve the alarms and events from the data generating entities. We've then got the ProcessVue archiver down at the bottom of the diagram. So the archiver retrieves the alarm and events from the collectors. uses a powerful parsing engine to normalize that alarm and event data before writing it into a industry standard SQL database. To the left of that, we've got the ProcessVue Analyzer, which is you can think of this as the reporting engine. It provides the data for the KPI reports. It allows us to track the number of alarms in a 10-minute period, monitor the priority distribution across your alarm population. And it's also used for identifying things like chattering and fleeting alarms, etc. We've then got the ProcessVue web server, which then presents that information to the local intranet, whereby the information gathered by ProcessVue can then be consumed using the ProcessVue web client. So now that we've looked at ProcessVue, let's have a look at some of the changes that we've noticed in the alarm management landscape. So it's a really exciting time to be involved in alarm management. If we were to look back at alarm management 4 or 5 years ago or more, alarm management was very focused on safety and compliance. It was very much thought of as just a cost center for compliance, helping to ensure that employees are safe and that the operating processes and continuous processes are also safe. And alarm management will always be associated with health and safety and compliance. But what we're seeing is a growing number of ProcessVue users that are challenging the status quo of alarm management. As well as using it for compliancy, they're also using it to help leverage productivity and efficiency as part of continuous improvement processes, especially as part of digital transformation strategies. And we've been having and are still continuing to have engagements with a number of companies in emerging industries within or for alarm management. And they have very different use cases for alarm management. And so I thought it'd be good to share some of what we've learned and some of our experiences. And we'll see as we go through this webinar that some of these engagements are helping to drive innovation within ProcessVue. So as we can see, we've got the traditional alarm management use case, which is the heavy industries, petrochemical, oil and gas, refineries, etc. And it's very much about health and safety and compliance and rationalizing the alarms, ensuring that they've got the relevant priorities, and reducing the volume of alarms that are presented to operators so that they've got good situational awareness and are able to take the relevant actions in response to those alarms. So then we've got the engagements with the new emerging verticals regarding alarm management. So let's take water and wastewater as a good example of this. So water and wastewater companies have the challenge of providing clean drinking waters to large geographical areas. And not only are they providing the clean drinking water, they're also removing the dirty wastewater and bringing it back for cleaning, refinement before it's sent back around that continuous cycle, that loop back as drinking water, etc. And because they've got their operations spread over a large regional area, they have lots of remote sites. And when alarm systems are put in, they're typically put in and the alarms are configured to the vendor's specifications, to what they think is an important or a priority alarm for them. And that may not always tie up with the business use case. So for example, wastewater company, because it's got a lot of geographical area to cover, it has remote assets, pumping stations, etc. And they're often unmanned. So when an alarm happens, there's obviously a number of other activities that happen in response to that alarm. If it's an unmanned site, they might have to send out an engineer to go and diagnose, fix, and repair the potential issue. Now, depending on whereabouts in the activities the alarm is generated, it may be too late for the engineer to carry out the diagnosis and repair before the process trips or they have some issues. So for a water and water company, it's about optimizing their alarms so that those alarms can work for them. So when an alarm happens, the operations can be alerted to the fact in enough time that they can then put the necessary steps in place to resolve the situation before things escalate. Also, water and wastewater have suffered over recent years due to environmental breaches. So it's about leveraging their alarm data to help gain insights into environmental breaches. So it's very different from the traditional safety and compliance use case of the heavy industries. So the next industry I'd like to talk about is pharmaceutical. So pharmaceutical, we find that they're quite mature when it comes to their alarm management. They have a good understanding that when you add an alarm to your systems, there is work and tasks for the operator to perform with the addition of every alarm. So they tend to rationalize before they implement alarms to ensure that their operations aren't overloaded. And this is in part due to the heavily regulated industry in which they operate. But what it does mean is that they don't have all of the nuisance alarms that we see in other industries. And that puts them in a great position to then use their alarm and event data to help drive product quality and help them in search of that golden or perfect batch, using the alarms to help reduce losses and trips in production. So the next use case I'd like to talk about is building management and data centers. So let's take data centers specifically. So data centers are providing a service, and it's all about being able to continue to provide that service. And they often have stringent service level agreements in place where they can suffer fairly heavy fines when they have a loss of service. So alarm management for building management and data centers is all about being able to reduce the time it takes to resolve issues, resolve in the meantime to repair, so they can continue to provide that service and therefore avoid the heavy monetary fines that go along with when they fall outside of their SLAs or break their SLAs. So some very different use cases to the traditional ones. I'd love to be able to spend more time on those use cases. There's lots to discuss, but unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, but we've got lots of new features and benefits to cover as part of the Analyser 4.0 release. So let's dive straight into the new release. So a quick summary of the new features. We've got a licensing manager that we're introducing. We've got a new additional module called work lists. We're introducing a new connector type to ProcessVue. We're enhancing alarm enrichment capabilities. We're introducing language support. And we've also been able to enhance the user experience and introduce some cyber security features. So let's dive in. So the first feature and benefits I'd like to talk about is our new licensing manager. So traditionally, if you were licensing ProcessVue, you would send off a license request file, and we would then return a number of license files. Each component in the ProcessVue suite had its own license with its own specific path in which we had to save the file in order for the license to be applied. This meant that the licensing could be fairly complex when working with it and trying to add new features, new modules to ProcessVue. So what we've done as part of Analyser 4.0 is we've simplified the whole licensing procedure. We've introduced a new licensing manager, which is the one place to go to manage your ProcessVue licenses. If you want to find out what licenses you've got, so what components are you licensed for, what additional modules have you got, you can go to the license manager to find all that information out. We've also introduced a licensing service, which all of the applications will talk to resolve the licenses. And what that means is instead of having 7 or 8 different files that you've got to manage when it comes to licensing ProcessVue, we can now license all of your ProcessVue software with a single license deployment pack. And that is deployed through the licensing manager. So it's going to make it much easier to license ProcessVue. Also, when you install the ProcessVue software, the licensing manager provides a 7-day evaluation license So if you've recently bought ProcessVue, for example, and you don't want to wait for the license to be applied before you can start commissioning, well, the licensing manager now enables you to hit the ground running. So as soon as you install it, you can then start commissioning the software using that evaluation license. You've then got a 7-day grace period in which to apply the official license. So the next feature that I'd like to talk about is the new additional module called work lists. So the work lists bring collaborative workspaces to ProcessVue that will help you manage, audit, and track specific alarm management challenges. And these will help move ProcessVue from being an application that you use when something goes wrong to something that you will use as part of your continuous improvement strategies on a day-to-day basis. So the work lists, there are 4 of them. We have a nuisance alarm work list, we have a stale alarm work list, we have an inhibit and override work list, and we have a shift work list. So I'll just go into a bit more detail about each of the work lists. So the first work list I'd like to talk about is the shift work list. So this will be the first time that we've been able to present alarms in a shift context. So now you'll be able to look back at alarms that happened within a particular shift. So maybe there was an incident that happened 3 months ago on the morning shift, let's say. Well, now using the shift work list, you'll be able to just select whichever shift you want from a list of historic shifts, and then look at all of the alarms that happened during that shift. So how do the shift work lists work? So the first thing you do is you create a shift pattern. So you create a shift time. So whether it's an 8-hour shift, a 12-hour shift, a 6-hour shift, you will set up the shift pattern, which will then be used when you create future shifts. So it remembers the lengths of the shifts. Once you create a shift, morning shift, day shift, night shift, whatever it may be, when the alarms start to occur during the shift, operators can then add alarms to the work list. Now, the interesting thing is when you add an alarm to the work list, it pulls up a list of the alarms that occur during your shift. So it will only present you with the information that's relevant to your current shift. So when you select alarms, now it may be a nuisance alarm that's occurred 100, 200 times. When you add one or more of those alarms, it compresses those instances down into a single instance of that alarm. And what that means is that you can then track and audit all of the activities taken around those nuisance alarms under a single alarm, making it really easy to find all of the information related to that alarm. So once an alarm's added to the work list, you can then assign it to responsible people. So if they're then taking actions in response to the alarm, they can log them and they can create an audit trail of all of the activities they take. When a shift ends, the shift goes into what we call a pending review state. So, for example, a person with a supervisory role could then come along and look at and review the actions that the operators have taken and just ensure that they've taken the correct actions. So the work list provides a number of benefits. It helps shift handovers because you've got all the information logged in one place in an easy to read, time accurate format. We're able to potentially identify additional operator training opportunities. And we're also providing quick access to all of the alarms through a shift context, whether that's a shift from yesterday or whether that's a shift from 6 months ago. Now, it's important to mention that obviously the shift work list will only be working from when you install it. So you'll have to have had it installed and working throughout that period. But once it's working, you can then look back at the alarms that you've added to the work list, etc. So the next feature I'd like to talk about is the nuisance alarm work list. So nuisance alarms are a problem for many industries. Nuisance alarms can generally equate to around 80% of the volume of alarms that your operators will experience and be exposed to during the operations. So it's no surprise to find that companies often work towards reducing those nuisance alarms so that they can make it easier for the operators to manage the plant and process. And companies will often use Excel spreadsheets to help them manage nuisance alarms. So we've introduced a nuisance alarm work list to help support and complement the Excel work lists. Or the Excel worksheets. So the nuisance alarm work lists allow you to look back over a customizable date and time range and see a list of the most frequently occurring alarms, and then add them to the work list. And from there, you can then assign those nuisance alarms to responsible people. So you may have a team of people that manage the nuisance alarms, guys from maintenance, etc. And you can now use ProcessVue to collaborate and manage the remediation work against those nuisance alarms. And again, when you assign them to responsible people, they can then add all of the activities that they take around resolving those alarms. And as long as they enter the resolution information, then the nuisance alarm worklist will provide a number of benefits for you. It will, first of all, enable you to demonstrate your continuous improvement processes as you're recording all the activities as you work on these nuisance alarms, reducing them. And it will also help reduce the mean time to repair of repeat offenders. If an alarm comes in and you manage it and audit the work that you carry out, fixing and resolving it, if that nuisance alarm occurs again in another 12 months' time, you can then just have a look at the history of what you did before to resolve it, and hopefully that will then help you reduce the time to repair. So the next feature I'd like to talk about is the inhibits and overrides work list, or the safety system bypass work list, we should call it. Safety systems are there to help identify when the process goes outside of its normal operating condition. It's easier to identify and notify the systems when they go outside of the normal operating conditions. So safety systems are traditionally implemented to monitor normal operations, and will only step in and trip the process and close things down if it goes outside the normal operating parameters. So that begs the question of what happens when the process does go outside of normal operating conditions, such as a startup or a shutdown period, or if you've got a piece of equipment that fails but isn't significant on its own to warrant a trip of the process. What we find is people will put inhibits and overrides in place to ensure that the process can continue running. Now, every time we inhibit or we override the safety system, of course, we're removing its capability to keep the process safe and to keep the employees safe. So it's important that any inhibits and overrides are communicated to the task force accordingly and everybody's aware of them. So companies will often use paper-based logbooks to record information about inhibits and overrides. And that's great. And providing you've got the time to be able to write the information in a manner that is easily written, you accurately timestamp that information. And if that's the only job that people have, then that's great. They can take the time to do it. But unfortunately, the real world doesn't always work like that. So there's often multiple tasks that happen. Incidents may occur, and that may prevent us from logging those inhibits and overrides at the correct time. We may come back sort of a little time after and then add maybe one or two inhibits and overrides to the logbook. And then, of course, we've got the time accuracy. We've then got to try and figure out what time the inhibit was put on, the override, etc. So what we've done to help and complement the inhibit and override logbook is we've introduced an inhibit and override work list. And so the inhibit and override work list allows ProcessVue to dynamically monitor for when an inhibit or an override is placed on your systems. It will then be added to a dynamic register. So the work list can be used to see all of the inhibits and overrides that are currently active on the system. Once they're on the work list, again, they can be assigned to responsible people who can then record and audit all of the action they take around those inhibits and overrides. If an override has to be in place for a certain amount of time and it needs to be on longer than a single shift, let's say, and we need to create justification for why that inhibit or override's going to be staying on for another shift, the work list can help us produce mitigation sheets. It takes all of the information around the inhibit and override, puts it into a report format, and then provides you with a number of editable fields that you can then type additional information. So you've then got that mitigation report in a digital format. So the inhibit and override worklist allows us to accurately timestamp the inhibits and overrides, provides a dynamic register, so you've got one place to go to look at the current inhibits and overrides without having to do anything in terms of recording them, and also promotes the awareness of them to the rest of the business. For example, if you were managing an offshore asset and you've got a paper-based logbook, if you wanted to review the governance of your inhibits and overrides, that would involve a costly trip offshore to be able to go and have a look at the logbooks and find out what's happening. However, with ProcessVue, because it's a web client, you could log on from the comfort of your office without having to go to the asset and then start reviewing those inhibits and overrides and the actions that have been taken around them from the comfort of your office to the web client. So the next feature I'd like to talk about is the new connector that we are adding to ProcessVue. So ProcessVue is vendor agnostic. And so we have a series of drivers that allow us to communicate with a host of different data sources and devices. We're able to collect alarms and events from TCP/IP using listen servers. We have flat file monitors that allow us to capture CSV files, text files, etc. We have SQL server table monitors that allow us to pull in select fields, custom fields from a SQL database. And we also have some SCADA or Aviva specific drivers that allow us to connect to Aviva's InTouch alarm database and also pull alarms from system platforms Historian. With the release of Analyser 4.0, we're introducing a new connector type, which we call Data Hub. And it's specifically an OPC UA connector. So it relies and leverages the experience that's been gained through Cogent's Data Hub. So who are Cogent? So Cogent are a leading OPC middleware solution supplier. They've been in the industry for over 15 years and have gained a lot of experience in implementing successful OPC architectures. And ProcessVue is set to leverage that experience with the release of Analyser 4.0. As we introduce the new connector, the Data Hub connector, what it means is that for the first time, ProcessVue is going to be able to connect and retrieve alarms and events from OPC UA alarms and condition enabled data sources via Data Hub. So in a typical architecture, you would have ProcessVue installed on a machine. You could then install Cogent Data Hub on the ProcessVue system. Now, it doesn't have to be on the ProcessVue system. If you already have Data Hub, it's used throughout the world, then you could leverage that instance of Data Hub. But the way it works is you'll configure Data Hub to communicate with the OPC UA server alarms and conditions endpoint, at which point it will start to pull the UA alarms and events into a Data Hub domain, which ProcessVue can now connect to and pull in those alarms and events and store them in the database. So what it means is ProcessVue is now going to be able to work with a much bigger audience of devices and data sources for its alarm analytics. So the next feature I want to talk about is the new alarm enrichment capabilities that we're adding as part of Analyser 4.0 release. So if we think about alarm enrichment, let's think about metadata, such as we add metadata to alarms to help us identify and associate and categorize the photographs. We could do the same thing with alarms. So here we've got a sample of raw data. So we've got things like, for example, a batch ID. We've got a date and time in there. We've got a tag. We've got a description. And what we've got on the next slide is we've got that same information that we've now enriched using the new enrichment capabilities. So if we zoom into this new particular window, what we can see is we've got that same information, but it's been passed through the ProcessVue parsing engine, and it's also been enriched. So we've got the date and time now in its separate field. We've got the tag, we've got the description, we've got the alarm status, we've got the batch ID. And what we've also done is we've enriched that alarm information with a number of pieces of metadata. So we've labeled the new fields 1, 2, and 3, and you can see there that the first field is equipment. So you can now identify which piece of equipment has generated the alarms. If it's not part of the original alarm message, we're able to add alarm categories to your data. So you can now perform analytics around the category of alarms, and we're also able to add grouping. And the reality is that we can add pretty much any metadata that we need to add. So how does this become relevant? So let's give an example. Let's take, for example, a wastewater company operating over a large geographical area with lots of different assets. Let's say that wastewater company wanted to aggregate all of their alarm data and centralize it and centralize operations. Because alarms are generated locally to each asset, to inform the operators that there's been an incident or that the operating process has gone outside of its normal parameters, it doesn't usually contain regional information like the plant name, the region that it's come from, the area, the equipment, etc. So for a wastewater company or wastewater company looking to aggregate the alarms, you could use the metadata to help identify where those alarms have come from. So which region is it from, what plant, what process, what piece of equipment. So you can really gain deeper insights into your alarm data. The use cases for metadata is pretty much limitless. It's only limited by your own imagination. If you're an offshore company, for example, you may use metadata to help identify ESD valves. So when an emergency shutdown valve travels, if you can identify it within your alarm data, you could potentially take credit for it. The fact that it's stroked within the last 12 months, you could then produce a report, let's say. And of course, if you can provide proof that the valve's traveled, it means you won't have to test it during your next shutdown. So you could have a reduced shutdown. So again, there's lots of use cases for enriching alarm data. So the next feature I'd like to talk about is the language support that we've added. So when you go to log on to ProcessVue, you'll be met with a drop-down menu. We've added localization. So we've currently added 5 languages. So you've got French, Spanish, Italian, Czech, and of course, English. So when you log on to the Analyser software, you'll select which language you wish to use, and then it will translate the GUI into your chosen language, enhancing the user experience, making it easier for you to use the software. So the next feature I'd like to talk about is the security enhancements that we've been able to squeeze in. So we understand that cybersecurity is an important topic, and I just want to stress that this is sort of the first of many updates. This will be a continuous improvement process. We understand how important cybersecurity is, and we'll be continually adding new features as time goes by. So what we've done is we've enhanced the logging into the ProcessVue database. So when somebody logs on to ProcessVue and they attempt the login and they supply the wrong password, we log all the relevant information about that attempt. We'll log the incorrect passwords, we'll log the number of retry attempts that there were, and we'll also log the date and time. So you've got more insight as to who's trying to log into the system. We've then also added web client user logout on idle time. Bit of a mouthful, bear with me. But what this does is it's an optional pre-configured timer that you could set for, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with. And what it means is that when somebody logs onto ProcessVue, they'll supply their username and password to authenticate. And at that point, we can take it that it's that person that's logged into the system. If the person then goes off for lunch and remains logged in, at a pre-configured time, we will generate and present interactive pop-ups to ensure that the user is still in front of the machine. If there's no response, we can then log that user out. And so what that does is it ensures that you've only got authorized people using the ProcessVue software. You won't have other people surfing on the back of them. So when somebody goes off to lunch, you won't get some other guy just coming in and then just using the software. So again, we're going to be adding more security features and functionality as time goes by. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the enhanced user experience that we've been able to squeeze into this release. So we've added the ability to navigate through your alarm history using the keyboard. So before you were using the mouse to click between the pages, we've now enabled the ability to use the cursor keys to move forward and backwards through time, a record at a time, and we've also added the ability to use page up and page down to jump whole pages at a time. And what we've also done is we've allowed you to change the number of records that you can see when you go into your alarm review mode. So you can either look at 30 alarms or go or look at as many as 1,000 to save you from having to page back each time to look at your alarm history. So it's all customizable now. So with a quick glimpse at the features that are coming as part of Analyser 4.0, it's time to just have a little talk about when you can get your hands on it and when it's being released. So the new version of Analyser 4.0 will be released at the end of April this year. And any business with a valid support contract in place will be able to install and run the software at no additional cost. We'll be sending an email out once we release the software to the user base. And as part of that email, there'll be a download link, which you'll be able to click on and download the latest version of software, which you can then install and perform the upgrade. However, if you're not comfortable performing the upgrade, then our partners can provide upgrade services where they can attend site and install the new release of ProcessVue, and they could also perform a multi-point health check just to ensure that your ProcessVue system is working as it should. If you'd like more information on any of the features that I've talked about during the webinar, then you can find more information on our website, which is, of course, www.processvue.com. We have a presence on LinkedIn, and we also have a channel on YouTube where we've posted videos that go into more detail about some of the features that I've spoken about during the webinar. And with that, I'd like to hand you back over to Grace, and we can see if there's been any questions raised.
Thank you, James. So we do have a couple of questions. The first one being, how does licensing work with the new OPC connector?
That's a great question. So ProcessVue connectors are licensed on the instances, not on the type of connector that it is. So if you're licensed for one connector, you could set that connector to be any of the available data communication drivers that are available, whether it's the OPC UA via Data Hub, or whether it's the SQL table monitor. You're free to select. We just license the number of them. Now, of course, with Cogent being a separate application, there may be a cost associated with the Cogent software if you don't have it already. And then, of course, you can contact your local ProcessVue representative who can provide more information on that.
And the final question that I can see at the moment is, do we have any training material or courses that are available for the new release?
Again, that's a great question. We are currently working on an e-learning platform, which will be another place you can go to find out more information about new features and functionalities as release them, and also find more information about the existing features of ProcessVue and the different applications. And we're looking to release that towards the end of the year, I think, at the moment. So another good question. Thank you, Grace.
That's all the questions I can see at the moment. If anyone thinks of anything they want to ask at a later time, you can email me. My email's on the invitations you would have received today, and I'll pass that over to the relevant person. And again, if you want to rewatch this webinar, you can do in a couple of days' time through our YouTube channel, and I think we'll also share it on our LinkedIn as well. And that's all from me. James, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of honourable mentions, I think, before we let everybody go. Just want to make people aware that we are starting a user group, a ProcessVue user group. Good and bad news to begin with. So the user group, the first instance of it will be hosted in the UK. We're not sure where the next one will be, so who knows, could be anywhere around the world. But the first one is going to be in the UK, and that's going to be sort of mid-April. We're going to be working with our partners who are presenting an alarm awareness day, and so the user group will form part of that day, coming sort of end of April. We've got a new release of ProcessVue Guardian, which will be releasing sort of middle to end of May, and that's going to bring a host of new exciting features. And I've already spoken about the e-learning platform, so that's pretty much it from me. So I'll just say thank you very much for attending the webinar. We value and appreciate your time, so thank you very much. And back over to you, Grace.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time today, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your week.